Okay, welcome back. We're talking about delegating, page 146. So having a junior guy in in the engineering department, that makes fantastic sense. The other one would be someone in the HR department could have the ability to add new users when they come in. They come in boarding, and they say, I'll just create your account for you right now. That'd be kind of cool. You don't have to show up at IT and say, I'm here for my account. That'd be kind of a cool thing to do. And so we talk about understanding accounts and groups, page 146. So users in a domain can log on to any machine that's in the domain. I mean, that's how we do it at the university. You don't have to sit at the same desk every day. You can sit at somebody else's desk and log in and everything. Now, is it going to have all your files? No. Could I have it so that it has all your files? I could, but we didn't do it at the university. So, and also it can be used not only for login, but you can actually go to file services and all the rest of the things, right? Using that same account. And so domain accounts, these are built into Active Directory, and they have, scope, a larger scope. And there's a huge number of types of accounts, and it's kind of complicated, so we're going to go nice and slow. I promise not to beat you up too much. So local accounts. Before we convert our machine over to a domain controller, we use local accounts. As soon as you go to a domain controller, when you promote the guy, the local accounts go away. They get instantly converted to domain accounts. Now, I don't particularly like that because I make a distinction with the names with a dot in them are local accounts, and names without dots are domain accounts. So when we do ours, I'm actually going to go in and whack the old one and go with a new one. That's just me. So all the local accounts are converted over. Now we're only talking about on the server, right? We're not talking about on your PC. You haven't touched your PC yet. You can still have both a local account and a domain account on a PC, but not on and on a regular server, you could have a local account and a domain account. But on the domain controller, all you have is domain accounts. Local ones are gone. Okay. User profiles. Now, on page 176, there's a local profile, which is stored on the local PC. That makes sense. A roaming profile. This one's kind of cool, where it's stored on a server, and so whenever I log in to whatever machine I go to, it's going to pull up my settings. So I don't have to go through and say, oh, well, I like my background like this, and I like my screensaver to be this, and I like my timeout for the screensaver to, none of all that stuff, right? Wouldn't that be kind of cool if I could have my entire profile follow me around? Now, why don't we do this at the university? Well, mainly you're not permanent employees. You're here for like a semester or two. And so it would be clumsy, not impossible. But I would probably have to have another file server, another server to handle the load of every place you go, no matter what machine you log into. It carries your stuff over. So it would work in a working environment where I expect people to stick around for a year. That'd be a pretty cool thing to do. And there's a thing called a mandatory profile. And then this means it's stored on the server, but when you get the screen, here you can't change the screensaver. I pick the screensaver for you. Okay. I pick your background, and you're not allowed to change it. And that's kind of heavy-handed, but you see the point. Like, for example, some companies want it so that every time you fire up your browser, it immediately goes to their own website first. That kind of goofy stuff. So it's copied. It's basically like a read-only profile. Here's your profile, but you can't do anything with it. Okay, so we're not going to be able to demonstrate that because we don't have the user account thing set up. So computer accounts, page 150. Whenever you add a computer to the domain, it builds a computer account. Okay, and then moving the computer to an OU is how you get managed. You manage that computer. Okay. Group types. So this is kind of weird. So when you create a group in Active Directory, you have a thing called a security group, which is just used for assigning permissions. That's it, nothing else. And then what's called a distribution group, and this is more like what you would find in Microsoft Excel. This would be like an email distribution. There's no real permissions associated with it. It's just so most people don't even use distribution groups unless they have Exchange Server running on their Active Directory domain. Default groups, yeah, there's a gazillion default groups. We're going to get there. And you get there with Active Directory users and computers. Group scope. Now this is tough, okay? This one's going to take some thinking. So here it goes. There's a thing called a domain local group. Okay, the domain local group has the accounts and other domain local groups, global groups, and universal groups. It's the lowest level thing, the domain local group. A global group has the accounts and global groups, and a universal has everything. Now, so I'm going to go through this a little bit more in detail, but let's just talk through it. Here's how it's supposed to work. When you're doing permissions, you want the machine that has the resource that you're after to not have to go ask Mother May I. So I want the permissions to be set using something that is I know to be cached on the server. So we're not talking about the domain controller. We're talking about a file server over here. Okay, a file server, I want to use what's called a local domain group because local groups are cached on the server. So when I ask for permission, it doesn't say, wait a minute, let me go check over here. Oh yeah, you remember that group. Great, you have permission. It can just do it locally. So this is the order in which these things works. So here's how we do it. Okay, I'm adding my account to a global group first, and then assign the global group to a domain local group, and then I assign permission to the domain local group. So using all, I'm starting with global, domain local, global, move the scope to domain and do that. Okay, now there's other ones in here. If you had universal groups, it's the same thing, but a universal group is bigger. Universal group would take things like from other domains. So I add my accounts to the global, I add the global to universal, add the universal to domain, and then so the bottom line is, the thing you really need to remember is, when I'm signing permission, I'm using the domain local group. And why? Because it's cached up, and it'll speed things up. Now the downside of this is, if someone got changed from one group to another, it might take, 5 minutes for these guys to update. I don't know how often the domain local groups are synchronized. Okay, I don't know. I'm sure it's not instantaneous. Okay, all right. So page 153, they kind of go through this, but this is kind of sort of tough, and I'm going to ask you some. Basically, I'm going to ask you not what each one of those things does, but basically the order in which you should have them. Okay. So let's assume that some machine someplace needs to check permissions. So how many places does it have to check? Well, I really want it to check just local, not the domain and not the forest. I mean, that's what I would want. So local group should be the quickest one to test, and the machine's going to be able to cache this thing up. But how do I go out to the domain to check for group membership? Yeah, that could take some time. I mean, if I did not use domain local group, every single time I say, I'd like this file, the machine says, hang on a second, let me go over this link and ask the Active Directory controller, Mother May I, and then come back. Well, that takes time, right? So I want this thing to be snappy, so you have to follow these rules, okay? Because a trip to the DC controller and back is not slow, but it might be if you're on one of those sites. Okay. So that answers the question of why the heck are we doing this? We're doing this, putting them in global groups, because it makes them available to anyone. We're putting them in a domain local group because that makes it easier to cache, and we're assigning permissions to the domain local group. Okay? Making sense? Okay, cool. So why are we doing this? Caching and control. All right. So in every case, the permissions are set locally because of speed and caching. Okay? Kind of making sense? All right, we've reached the end of this chapter. We'll see you guys in the next chapter.